Samsaradava nalalidaloka Tranaya karunya gunaganatva Samsaradava nalalidaloka Tranaya karunya gunaganatva Praptasya kalanya gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Praptasya kalanya gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Mahaprabhu ke Tana Nitya Gita Vaditramadhyan Manasorasena Mahaprabhu ke Tana Nitya Gita Vaditramadhyan Manasorasena Okay. Romanchakampa Shutaranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Romanchakampa Shutaranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Shri Vigrahara Dhana Nityanana Shingaratan Mandiramajanada Grahara Dhana Nitya Shri Vigrahara Dhana Nityanana Shingaratan Mandiramajanada Yuktasya bhaktam chaminjatapi Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Yuktasya bhaktam chaminjatapi Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Chato Vidashi Bhagavat Prasada Swadhana Tritan Hari Bhakta Sangha Chatuvidashi Bhagavat Prasada Swadvana Triptan Hari Bhakta Sangha. Vidveva Teptem Bhajata Sadeva Vande Guroshi Charanaruvinda. Vidveva Treptem Bhajata Sadeva Vande Guroshi Charanaruvinda. Shiradhikama Dhavayora Para Madhuya Lila Gunarupanana. Shiradhikama Dhavayora Para Madhuya Lila Gunarupanana. Protekshana Swadhana Lalupasya Vande Guroshi Charanaruvinda. Protekshana Swadhana Lalupasya Vande Guroshi Charanaruvinda. Nikunjayuna Vatikele Sedai Yaya Libiyo Tirapekshaniya. Nikunjayuna Vatikele Sedai Yaya Libiyo Tirapekshaniya. Tattva-tidaksha Dativallabhasya Vande Guroshi Charanaravindam. Vande Guroshi Tattva-tidaksha Dativallabhasya Vande Guroshi Charanaravindam. Tattva-tidaksha Dativallabhasya Shakshadaridve Nachamasta Shastre Uktastata Bhavyataheva Sandhi. Shakshadaridve Nachamasta Shastre Ukta Tata Bhavyataheva Sandhi. Pinto Prabhuya Priyavatasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda. Pinto Prabhuya Priyavatasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda. Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada Prasada Nagati Kutopi. Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada Yasya Prasada Nagati Kutopi. Jayantuvam tasya yasastri sanyam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda. Jayantuvam tasya yasastri sanyam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda. Samsaradava Nalale Dalaka Pranaya Karunya Gunaganatva. Samsaradava Nalale Dalaka Pranaya Karunya Gunaganatva. Praptasya kalanya gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda. Praptasya kalanya gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda. 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 Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya, Jai Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prestaya, Bhutale, Srimate Bhakti Vedanta, Swami Niti Namine. Krishna Padaya, Krishna Prestaya, Bhutale, Srimate Bhakti Vedanta, Swami Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschatya Satarine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vranda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vranda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vranda. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vranda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Nitai Gora Haribo. Yo, Mr. Bapanam Hamsa Parivachakacharyo Stotra Sudha Shishindavange Sobochan Bhakti Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Chari Devange Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Yo, Mr. Bapanam Hamsa Parivachakacharyo Stotra Sudha Shishindavange Srila Bhakti Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anand Koti Vaishnavanda Ki Jai Namachar Srila Rastakor Ki Jai Prem Se Kosh Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavan Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Govinda Sham Kund Radha Kund Gir Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navdeep Dham Ki Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktavanda Ki Jai Nitai Gopramanande. All glories to the Same devotees. All glories to the Same devotees. All glories to the Same devotees. All glories, Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glories to Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna and welcome to tonight's glorification of Srila Prabhupada. We're going to spend this time glorifying Srila Prabhupada, hearing some pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. And what we'll do first is we will read the translation of this wonderful song, Guruvastakam, by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Is actually 9 verses. So we will read the 8 verses as well as the 9th. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on a rainforest, fire to extinguish it. So the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the dust, unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master, who is an ocean of auspicious qualities. Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing, and playing musical instruments, the spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind. Sometimes his hair stands on end, he feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always engaged in temple worship of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. He always engages a disciple in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious foods, analyzed as that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasad, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava, and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert in assisting the gopis, who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavan. I offer my most humble obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servant of the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master, who is a bona fide representative of Shri Hari Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master. At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master. So this text 9, which is the Shrutifal of the Guruvastakam, Srimad Guruvastakam etad uchair brahme murte patati prayatnat yastena vrindavanatha shakshad seveva labhyad janushontaeva. So Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur is giving the fruit, the Shrutifal, one who with great care and attention, alteration should be attention, loudly recites this beautiful prayer to the spiritual master during the Brahma Muhurta obtains direct service to Krishna, the Lord of Vrindavan, at the time of his death. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So Srila Prabhupada said, you should not be carried away by the dictation of the mind, but the mind should be carried by your dictation. And not only by our dictation, but really by the dictation of Srila Prabhupada, his pastimes, his glories. When we hear about the glories of the pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada, it does many wonderful things to our heart. Firstly, it pleases Krishna by glorifying the pure devotee of the Lord. And what to talk about glorifying a pure devotee, but glorifying an exalted Mahabhagavat Senapati, chief commander of Lord Chaitanya's army, like Srila Prabhupada, is no doubt very pleasing to the Lord. It also melts our heart and allows our heart to become a wonderful receptacle to get the qualities which Srila Prabhupada has. So we begin to imbibe the qualities and mood of Srila Prabhupada by glorifying Srila Prabhupada. So I will start and then we'll share the mic to share pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. I like to share from my Vyasa Puja offering, I shared 2 specific pastimes of Srila Prabhupada, which is very wonderful. The first one was actually shared by Mother Govinda Dasi. She was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in the early days and a very wonderful disciple of Srila Prabhupada. She was looking through some of her old Indian papers and she stumbled on one where one great astrologer had written something on that piece of paper. And she read what was written on that piece of paper by this astrologer about Srila Prabhupada's birth chart. And it was written, nobody can read this chart. If they say that they can, they are simply lying. This personality comes and goes at his own sweet will. He is not bound by anybody or anything. The stars are lined up perfectly. There is no question of karma. He is working directly under the will of God. And when he writes, his pen does not have ink in it. His pen has in it fire, which will burn the ignorance of the whole world. So, very wonderful description of Srila Prabhupada's position and glory. That he will, his pen has fire in it that will burn all the ignorance of the world. And through his books that Srila Prabhupada has given, his Bhaktivedanta purports, these immortalized words in these Bhaktivedanta purports really uh, is burning away the ignorance of this world. Then I shared another pastime of Srila Prabhupada. This illustrated Srila Prabhupada's compassion. In 1976, Srila Prabhupada displayed his unlimited kindness and mercy upon one of his disciples who had fallen away. This disciple was actually a sannyas disciple of Srila Prabhupada who joined early in 1968. He also cooked for Srila Prabhupada very often, so he was very good at cooking as well. But not only did he stop following the four-regular principles, but he also stopped chanting. So he fell away from the path of devotional service, and he also became very critical of Srila Prabhupada. Because he joined in the early days, he was critical of Srila Prabhupada because he actually wanted to become a rock star. So he was criticizing Srila Prabhupada that I gave my early years to Srila Prabhupada, and because of that, I couldn't become a rock star. And he had grown long hair, long black beard. But one good thing was that he was attached to eating prasadam. So very regularly he would visit the New York Temple on 55th Street. It's a long story, 12-story building. And on the ground floor, the devotees had a restaurant, Govinda's restaurant. So every day he would come, very regularly he would come to take prasad. But because he was a fallen, devotee, people would call him, bloop disciple, and nobody would really speak to him. But the devotee who managed the restaurant, Mother Amakela, Devi Dasi, she was very kind upon this disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and she was very friendly. She made him feel welcome. So he would always come, sit at the restaurant, take prasad, and always have a chat with her. One day, Srila Prabhupada was arriving at the temple, and there were about 20 devotees gathered in front of the temple, uh, waiting to receive Srila Prabhupada chanting. And this devotee happened to come at this point in time. And immediately he saw Makela, and he walked to Mother Makela and he asked her, what's happening here? Why are there so many devotees here? And she mentioned because Srila Prabhupada is arriving and they're waiting for Prabhupada. She's going to arrive in a few minutes. And sure enough, a few minutes later, a car pulled up with Srila Prabhupada sitting at the back seat. The devotees opened the door. Srila Prabhupada got out of the door, out of the car. And the senior disciples of Srila Prabhupada, they directed Srila Prabhupada to the temple room. And Srila Prabhupada, he saw, his glance fell upon this disciple of him, this disciple of his who fell away. And immediately Srila Prabhupada did not go into the temple room. Srila Prabhupada walked straight up to his disciple next to Amakela. And he came up to his disciple. He looked straight at him, smiled, patted him on his head, and Srila Prabhupada asked him, will you cook for me while I'm here? So immediately some senior disciples went to Srila Prabhupada and whispered in his ear, Srila Prabhupada, you cannot eat his cooking because he's not following. He's eating meat. He's not chanting, and he's also very offensive of you, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada completely ignored what he had heard, what was whispered in his ears. And Srila Prabhupada looked at his disciple and said, will you cook for me while I'm here? And this disciple immediately agreed. And while Srila Prabhupada was staying there in New York Temple for the few days, this disciple actually assisted with Mother Makela, cooked for Srila Prabhupada. So this was Srila Prabhupada's unlimited compassion. Srila Prabhupada really was not interested in one's faults. Srila Prabhupada was giving his mercy. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
So while Nishingananda Prabhu was speaking about that pastime, am I audible? If somebody can just give me an indication because I'm using a different microphone so while Nishingananda Prabhu was speaking about this devotee who had fallen away and Prabhupada had accepted his service, I was remembering another pastime that I heard His Holiness Indradumna Maharaj say. And it's a story of a person who practically was a hopeless case. So much so that the devotees thought that he was not a candidate for Prabhupada's mercy. This pastime took place in France, and His Holiness Indradumna Maharaj was saying how Prabhupada would go out as per his normal schedule on a morning walk before greetings of the deities. And there was a tramp who was so coated in dirt. Um, it is possible to imagine that that the dirt was actually so thick on this devotee's body that it was caked. Um, so he stank like anything, and he would sleep in the midst of a bush. So Prabhupada would walk past that bush, and this person would see this effulgent, uh, empowered representative of Krishna gliding past his habitat together with the rest of the devotees, and he immediately was attracted to Prabhupada. So he came to the temple one morning, and he tried to approach Prabhupada, but then the devotees kind of shooed him away, not to disturb Srila Prabhupada. So he was granted intelligence by the Supersoul how to actually grab the mercy. Because when in the heart one is actually uh, greedy for mercy, the Supersoul actually makes an arrangement for Krishna to come and be, into one's life. So this person, who the devotees actually nickname Pigpen, he uh, followed Srila Prabhupada and the devotees, and he knew that every day Prabhupada enters the temple room first because he's like the leader of this pack. So the devotees, when Prabhupada entered the temple room one morning after the morning walk, Pigpen was already in the center of the temple room, and he was waiting for Prabhupada to enter. And when Prabhupada entered, then this person, Pigpen, he just dived for Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet, and he held onto it. And the devotees were so shocked that he had the audacity to do this. So at that time, Prabhupada, with all of his mercy that we've been hearing about and we know from our, reading and associating with devotees, Prabhupada's mercy was beyond our understanding, unfathomable. So Prabhupada put his hand on this person, Pigpen's head, and Prabhupada brushed his head with his hand, and he said, "That's okay, that's okay." So this pastime really touched my heart when I heard about it, and endeared me much more to Srila Prabhupada, that when everybody shuns a person, there is a place in the heart of Srila Prabhupada to give the person mercy. So that's the benediction of taking shelter of Prabhupada. So the devotees, they didn't know what to do, because now they couldn't chase this person away because Prabhupada had given mercy to Pigpen. So then they decided, okay, they'll take him upstairs. They pushed him into a shower and turned on the taps, and let him get cleansed. And then they shaved him up, made him shower again, and they stuck him in a dhoti, and he could hardly ever speak a sentence of English. So what they did was that they put him in the kitchen to wash pots. And Pigpen, he started to wash the pots. And every day Pigpen would wash the pots, but he noticed that the devotees were going out on Sankirtan. So one day, Indradumna Maharaj, who was the leader of the Sankirtan party, he had a van. So they had packed the van with all of the boxes of books, etc. And when they came out, Pigpen was sitting in the front seat. So Indradyumna Maharaj said, Pigpen, where are you going? You can't, he said Sankirtan. And then, because he had heard the devotees speak about Sankirtan, so he said Sankirtan. And then Indradyumna Maharaj said, no, you can't come. You can't come. So then Pigpen was persistent. He sat in the van. So Indradyumna Maharaj thought, okay, he can wash the Sankirtan van later when they encountered a tap somewhere or something like that. So when they went to the Sankirtan spot, which was a huge shopping center sort of place, they parked in the parking lot, and the circumstances were sensitive because the police normally would stop the devotees, arrest the devotees, etc. So Pigpen was the first person out of the van. He grabbed a Sankirtan bag that was packed with books and he disappeared. And so the devotees didn't know what to do with him. And as they were taking their breakfast that they had packed, they noticed that Pigpen was stopping people. And every person he was stopping was taking a book from him. And the devotees were quite surprised because he couldn't even speak English. And they were wondering, what is Pigpen doing? And after some time, he returned with an empty Sankirtan bag very quickly. And then they asked him, Pigpen, what did you tell the people? And he uttered, Prabhupada saved me. So all he was doing was he was holding one of Prabhupada's books up and he was saying, Prabhupada saved me. And by the potency of Srila Prabhupada and by the sincerity of Pigpen in connecting himself to Srila Prabhupada, just as, electric appliance is valueless unless it's connected to a socket. So similarly, Pigpen, who was now plugged into this mercy source, had become so empowered and attractive as an instrument in this divine mission that Krishna was using him to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books. This devotee, Pigpen, uh, became one of the great book distributors in our movement. He got initiated by Srila Prabhupada, and his name was Rasada Das. Prabhupada gave him the name Rasada Das. Then there's a story of Crazy Peter. Crazy Peter would come and he would simply sleep. He would eat and sleep in the temple. And and Satsvarup Maharaj had written to Srila Prabhupada because he was the temple president. And he explained the situation that this person is lazy and he takes one, but he had one good quality. Every day he would take one book of Srila Prabhupada that he would find lying around in the temple. And he would read the book and then he would fall asleep. And sometimes, very often, his favorite spot was on the entrance of the temple. So they were thinking what to do with him. So Satsvarup Maharaj had written to Prabhupada and told Prabhupada that this person, he's so lazy, we don't know what to do with him. Can you please advise us? All he does is he reads your book and then he falls asleep and he doesn't do anything else. And Prabhupada's reply in response to Satsvarup Maharaj's letter was, what's the matter? Can't you tolerate? So Satsvarup Maharaj, when he got that letter and when he told the story, he was thinking, of another instance when Prabhupada told the devotees, or that was complaining about somebody else. Prabhupada said, I tolerate you. Can't you tolerate that person? So it was such an eye opener for Satsvarup Maharaj that he decided to tolerate Crazy Peter. And Crazy Peter, he later on was initiated by Srila Prabhupada and he got the name Kushakrata Das. Kushakrata Prabhu is the person that was responsible. He left his body a few years back in Vrindavan. He, after he got first and second initiation by Srila Prabhupada, became one of the best translators of Srila Rupa Goswami's esoteric works. So most of the works of Srila Rupa Goswami were translated into English language by Kushakrata Prabhu. And that happened just because Prabhupada had faith in the person. So, what a magnanimous person, what a magnanimous heart that Prabhupada has a place for every one of us, no matter what our condition is. Prabhupada, if we are sincere and we have the desire to serve him, he has, there's a place in his heart for you and I.
So Srila Prabhupada said, if you sell diamonds, you cannot expect to have many customers. But a diamond is a diamond, even if there are no customers. And Srila Prabhupada is giving diamonds. And we find there are so many people, so many souls in this world that are taking these diamonds from Srila Prabhupada. Now, today is the 14th of August, and Srila Prabhupada had few exchanges, many exchanges, but I'm going to share uh, two exchanges that Srila Prabhupada had on the 14th of August. This was narrated by Hari Sori Prabhu.
Today.
Yeah, today. In 1976 in Bombay. So Harikas Swami, Harikas Maharaj came to see Srila Prabhupada during a massage with some disturbing news. He said that a former president, that means temple president, of one of our American disciples, who is now believed to be here in India, is dealing in drugs and saying that Srila Prabhupada has condoned it. Apparently, he has twisted the philosophy to such a degree that he believes that if he sells drugs and uses the money for spreading Krishna consciousness, it is all right. So Srila Prabhupada's reaction was very strong. And Prabhupada said, we don't want your money. Stop this immediately. So Srila Prabhupada, he agreed that a letter should be sent to the GBC, that this kind of activity should not be allowed in the name of Krishna consciousness. And then another incident that took place 14th of August was Srila Prabhupada. In fact, Dhananjay Prabhu recollects this, that a lot of devotees may not know. Actually, Srila Prabhupada gave the land New Goloka, and that's why he named the deities Radha, Gokulanan, or New Gokul. That's why he named the manor, the deities in the manor, Radha Gokulananda. And he wanted that the main activity there be Go Raksha, cow protection. And Srila Prabhupada said he wanted 150 cows kept on that property. And Dhananjaya Prabhu responded back to Srila Prabhupada that Prabhupada, that's not practical because of the 17 acres of land and that they had, there's only 6 acres which was for the pasture land. And Dhananjay Prabhu continued, he said that actually you need at least 1 acre per cow. So that would mean that we need to buy 150 acres of land. So Srila Prabhupada responded, so you buy another 150 acres of land. What is the difficulty? Uh, this is the most important duty, to look after the cows and explain the importance of cow protection. Srila Prabhupada, he continued, he also said we should purchase a double-decker bus and drive the bus into central London, fill up the bus with Western tourists, Western people, and bring them out to the manor so that they can be educated in simple living and high thinking. He said, besides showing them how cow is protected, we should also be producing milk for sale, and butter and yogurt, and also ghee. He said, Srila Prabhupada said, if we make our own ghee, so many people will want to purchase the ghee because there's nothing like homemade ghee. And Prabhupada also said that other activities that a devotee should be doing, there is spinning and weaving and different handcrafts. So we should be making our own clothes. This is what he wanted to happen there. Then Dhananjay Prabhu asked him about the Indian community. And Srila Prabhupada said, he asked actually, should we cultivate the Indian community? And Srila Prabhupada said, they're already Krishna conscious. He said, we should concentrate on a British community. And he said they know nothing about Krishna. So Prabhupada wanted to give Krishna consciousness to the people in that country and most important Go Raksha.
When you're talking about the cows, I was remembering that Srila Prabhupada said to the devotees that if you get a milk from a black cow, it's very good quality milk. So when we established the temple in Midrand, we had the first cow we got was a black pregnant cow, and we named her Lakshmi
Lakshmi
Priya.
Priya.
So so Prabhupada said the black cow, and then I was reading about it, and a Jersey cow, which is like the black cow, actually does give the highest quality and quantity of milk. So when the spiritual master gives an instruction, he also gives the empowerment for the sincere disciple to follow such an instruction. And just before Lord Balaram's appearance this year, I was reading different things, and I remember reading about the establishment of the Krishna Balaram temple in Raman Reddy, Vrindavan. And the devotee Guru Das, who was sort of the temple president that Prabhupada had first put in charge there to oversee the construction, Prabhupada told Guru Das Prabhu that he should start a Goshala. And Prabhupada gave him some directions on how many cows to buy, etc. And this devotee, Guru Das Prabhu, he was thinking, how will I be able to do it, because a cow costs this much of money and we don't have this much of money, etc. But he was very sincere that if Prabhupada wanted something, it must be done. And if we make the endeavor, Krishna will provide. Because Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, I carry what they lack, and I preserve what they have for the devotees. So Gurudas Prabhu, he got the inspiration that he owned, the most valuable thing that he owned was a Seiko watch that was worth some money. So he decided to see how much money he could get if he sells the Seiko watch. And he went to some merchant. He sold the watch with, and he was able to get enough money to purchase 3 cows. And this was like so incredible that he could start the Vrindavan Goshala because it was Prabhupada's desire. And, just by doing that, Krishna gave the intelligence how to fructify the desire of Srila Prabhupada, because the words of a pure devotee are virtuous, and to keep up the virtue, the follower makes it come to life.
So Srila Prabhupada says humility means that one should not be anxious to have satisfaction of being honored by others. So Madhu Dasi, she mentioned in her first pastime about sincerity, and then again this time she mentioned about sincerity. So Srila Prabhupada was once asked, how can we become sincere? This is a very, very important question, and many devotees have this question: how can one become sincere? Because Srila Prabhupada has mentioned many times that devotees should become sincere. So Srila Prabhupada responded that how can one become sincere? You can become sincere by becoming sincere. So that was Srila Prabhupada's answer.
Reminds me of the Nike slogan, just
Just
do
do
it.
it. Yes, just do it. So just become sincere. So Srila Prabhupada gave that. Why? Sincerity is, sincerity gives us strength. In one of the Bhagavatam purports, Srila Prabhupada stresses this quality of sincerity, that even if we do not have other qualities, in this age of Kali Yuga, we are not very qualified, we are not very advanced. And um, if if the devotees have just this one quality of sincerity, they may be lacking all others, but this one quality is enough to make you advance. Krishna will take you to the highest levels of advancement, provided you have this one quality of sincerity. In the Science of Self-Realization, Srila Prabhupada, he says that you can see Krishna face to face simply if you sincere. You can meet Krishna simply if you sincere. So that's sincerity, which means you are truthfully following the process of Krishna consciousness. You are uh, truthfully following the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. You genuinely, truthfully want to follow. So that's sincerity. Very, very wonderful.
So, with sincerity, like Prabhu is so nicely describing there, when one makes the endeavor, then Krishna, he makes so many different arrangements in regards to the limitations that we think we may have. Like, for example, when Srila Prabhupada had told Rameshwar Prabhu that he wanted the Chaitanya Charitamrita to be printed in 1 month, then Rameshwar Prabhu, he arranged for this one Mataji to come from New Vrindavan because she was a very fast typist. And he brought her to this place where they had set up in Los Angeles. They had set up a very nice system where they got different families to take care of different devotees who were like the frontline soldiers in getting the the Chaitanya Charitamrita, ready in the 1 month period that Prabhupada wanted them to do so. So all the clothes were, washed by the families. They were fed by families. They didn't have to think about any other requirement. They just had to focus on their service. So they were so focused and with such sincerity that they would stay up practically all night, give it their best shot because it was Prabhupada's desire, and whatever, with every breath of their existence, they wanted to make Prabhupada's desire a reality. So this Mataji, she was typing like this, and then one morning, on the morning walk, uh, the devotees told Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, there's one, they told Srila Prabhupada on a morning walk about this Mataji. The devotees said, like, Prabhupada, there's this one Mataji who's practically not eating or sleeping. She's just typing all day and night. And Prabhupada, he was so pleased by this. He said, yes, she's running on spiritual energy. And we could see that Srila Prabhupada's schedule, if you look at it, no ordinary person could do this. So take on something spiritual with the pure intention of service and satisfaction to a personality so great as Srila Prabhupada and the rest of our parampara, then this empowerment that comes with it is totally extraordinary. You can go ahead.
So Madhuri was talking about empowerment and how they were printing the Chaitanya Charitamrita. When Srila Prabhupada said he wants all 17 volumes printed, the devotees had to go on a marathon, and they got all the painters from the whole world into Boston temple. And Srila Prabhupada, they had requested Srila Prabhupada to also come and stay with the devotees to inspire them. So the devotees are working around the clock. Now, what was interesting was, just consider that these devotees had no idea of Krishna, especially the painters. Srila Prabhupada, actually were doing the Krishna book at one point also. And Srila Prabhupada had given them, like a picture sketch of Krishna, what they must, how they must paint Krishna. And the devotees, they were communicating with Srila Prabhupada and they said, Srila Prabhupada, you know, we have no idea how to print, how to paint Krishna, how to paint God. I mean, just consider, what to talk about knowing God. Here you have to paint God. So you can't just, concoct an idea that you have in your mind and paint. You have to follow Srila Prabhupada's direction, but Prabhupada didn't give all the details. He gave you a sketch and you had to now put in the details. So the devotees, they wanted to please Srila Prabhupada. They were sincere. So the devotees they were actually chanting so intently, you know, praying to Krishna that you please inspire us. You move our brush so that you manifest yourself through our hands, through this paintbrush, because we want to please Srila Prabhupada. So because they had this great sincere desire intense desire to please Srila Prabhupada. They were chanting so attentively, like it was a matter of life or death. And they wrote to Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, all we can do is chant, this way and pray that we paint. And Prabhupada responded that yes, your painting will be successful because you are chanting in this way.
Your concluding sentence here is your painting will be successful. What to speak of just a painting or accomplishing any service in the and achieving success? The whole purpose of human life becomes a success if one links in to Srila Prabhupada's mission. And what comes to mind is the story of a devotee called Prituputra Swami. He was the first French sannyasi Prabhupada disciple. And he did like some amazing service for the preaching mission of Srila Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But sadly, after Prabhupada's departure from this world, his physical demise, we should say, this Prita Prabhu, he somehow left Krishna consciousness, and he resumed a lifestyle that he led before he joined Krishna consciousness, which would mean like, sex, drug, and rock and roll. So he never actually came back to Krishna consciousness externally. Nevertheless, he never criticized Krishna consciousness. And some years later, he unfortunately had AIDS. As the disease sort of progressed and withered his material body, he was hospitalized. And, as this disease progressed further, he was hooked on machines which had to keep him alive. But in his last days, he was actually in a coma. He was about to die any day, and the doctors had like gathered around his bed and tried to estimate how many days, if not hours, he had to live. As they discussed his condition, all of a sudden, this devotee, Prituputra Prabhu, opened his eyes, he sat up in bed, and he looked towards the door. And Prabhupada came and he said, can you imagine? He just like woke up from the coma in the presence of these doctors. And he said, Prabhupada, you came. Then he lay back on the bed, closed his eyes, and he left his body. And the doctors later told the devotees that this is what happened because the devotees had heard that, he was in hospital. So they were coming to visit him and bring auspicious substances, etc. But it's so incredible that Prabhupada never forsakes anyone who, in an without committing offenses, sticks to this part. So, that's like so heart touching that Prabhupada will never leave you. Your service to Prabhupada never goes in vain.
Srila Prabhupada says, when a Krishna conscious person is elevated to a responsible position, he never becomes puffed up. Just like a tree, when overladen with fruits, becomes humble and lowered down. Similarly, a great soul in Krishna consciousness becomes humbler than the grass and bowed down like the fruitful trees because a Krishna conscious person acts as an agent of Krishna. Therefore, he discharges his duties with great responsibility. So, one of my favorite pastimes is a pastime of Srila Prabhupada and Kartikeya. This pastime, illustrates our relationship with Srila Prabhupada. We may have not directly, met Srila Prabhupada and been initiated by Srila Prabhupada as direct disciples. We may be grand disciples and grand disciples, and in the future, there'll be grander and great grand disciples, and that's glorious, because naturally Srila Prabhupada would be more kind as a grandfather, as a great grandfather, as a great grandfather. Prabhupada will be more kind to souls in that relationship. So we having Srila Prabhupada as our grandfather or great grandfather, this is very, very wonderful. And it's glorious that we have such fortunate and glorious to have such a relationship. So to illustrate this wonderful relationship, mm, Kartikeya Prabhu was cooking. He was one of Srila Prabhupada's cooks, and he would always cook halva for Srila Prabhupada, especially when the weather would be cold or rainy. Srila Prabhupada would ask for halva, and they would make halva from farina. So one day, Mother Govinda Dasi, yeah, which is semolina, farina. So one time, Mother Govinda Dasi, she bought some wheat germ, which is a more healthy version of semolina, and she gave it to Kartikeya. And Kartikeya was so happy that he got this wheat germ. And he said that next time when Srila Prabhupada asks for halva, he'll make it with wheat germ instead of farina, because it's a more healthy version. And sure enough, the time came. It was the weather, was rainy, and Srila Prabhupada asked Kartikeya to make some halva, because it gives him a lot of warmth. So immediately Kartikeya, he thought Srila Prabhupada is really going to be pleased with this halva that I'm making with wheat germ. So he went into the kitchen, um, and he cooked the wheat germ with so much, love and attention. He was meditating. Prabhupada was definitely going to be pleased with his halva. He made the halva, he offered to the deities, he put in a bowl, and he came into Prabhupada's room, and he handed over the wheat germ halva to Srila Prabhupada. And as soon as he brought the wheat germ and stretched his arm to Srila Prabhupada, giving the bowl of halva, of wheat germ halva, Srila Prabhupada looked at it. And then Srila Prabhupada, with his left hand, indicated, take it away. So in Indian culture, if you politely want to tell someone you don't want something, then with your right hand you can motion you don't want. But if you really, in like very upset in a nasty way, so to speak, you want to tell someone you don't want something, you tell them with the left hand. So Prabhupada, he was uh, he told Kartikeya with his left hand to take it away. So that really meant Srila Prabhupada was not interested in that halva. And Kartikeya was a very sensitive devotee, and he was heartbroken because all he wanted to do, was to please Srila Prabhupada. And now Srila Prabhupada, was upset, did not, accept the halva, and he was devastated. So Kartikeya, being devastated, he went into the temple room, sat down in the front of a picture of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, who is his grandfather, and with tears in his eyes, he began to cry and pray. And he started speaking to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj in a prayerful manner. And he said, I was simply trying to please your spiritual son. And now he's upset with me. I don't know what to do. Few minutes later, suddenly he heard Srila Prabhupada's voice, Kartikeya, Kartikeya. And immediately Kartikeya got up. He ran into Prabhupada's room and he said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, bring that halva. Kartikeya brought the bowl of halva. Srila Prabhupada began to eat the halva, and he completed the whole bowl. Srila Prabhupada said, bring more. And immediately Kartikeya went, brought more. Srila Prabhupada ate that. This way, Srila Prabhupada ate everything that was in the pot. So, because Kartikeya was praying to his grandfather being more merciful, there must have been some exchange, transcendental exchange between Srila Prabhupada as the son and his spiritual father, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, and Srila Prabhupada reciprocated with Kartikeya Prabhu's devotional cooking. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
So we spent a lot of time in our, a fair amount of our time studying under a very nice devotee called His Grace Burijan Prabhu. And one time he was telling of a time when he was with Srila Prabhupada in Tokyo around, I think it was 1972. And Kirtanananda Prabhu Swami, that Kirtananda Swami, was asking Srila Prabhupada about dressing in karmi clothes to go out. Kirtanananda Prabhu's um, point to Srila Prabhupada was that the devotees should wear kurta and dhoti when they go out on book distribution, because some of the devotees had taken to wearing pants and shirt. And so they brought the question to Srila Prabhupada, and then Prabhupada was answering and having a long discussion about this. So at one point in the conversation, when Kirtan and Ananda Prabhu and Prabhupada were speaking, Burichan Prabhu, he interjected and he told, because another devotee that was present, Karandar Prabhu, he was saying, Prabhupada, the devotees bring in so much of Lakshmi and they sell so many books when they go out in pants and shirt. And if they wear dhoti and kurta, in some circumstances, it may not be good. They may not be able to sell the books. So Burichan Prabhu, he interjected and he said to Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, we're not interested in the money, right? And Srila Prabhupada immediately reprimanded him. He said, so we're not interested in the money. Without money, how can we spread Krishna consciousness? This is hippie philosophy. Money is Lakshmi and is meant for Krishna service. This is nonsense that we don't need the money, because Lakshmi is actually the goddess of fortune. She's the consort of Narayan. And when she's in the hands of the materialists, the devotee actually sees this and is interested in reuniting Lakshmi with Narayan. Therefore, the hippie mentality of money is not required, is not necessary, is was shunned by Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada was so expert at giving proper direction in every instance. Recently, I heard Kurma Prabhu speak, and he was giving the story of one time in a temple, the devotees had some small deities, small-sized Radha Krishna deities, and they were worshipping. However, the movement was very young, and devotees were very new to deity worship. So just pretty much as if a person gets a doll, then one makes a doll house, which is a small house, and then one has small plates and small stove and small things for the small doll. So the devotees, seeing that the Radha Krishna was small, they got some small plates and small cups and small spoons, and they were making small offerings, small roti, small things for those small plates, and offering it to Radha Krishna. And when Prabhupada, one of the devotees, mentioned that to Prabhupada or asked Prabhupada, when Prabhupada got to know about it, Prabhupada said, no, this is not how it should be done. When you serve the deity, no matter what size he is, you should cook as if you're cooking for a hungry 16-year-old boy. So Prabhupada went on to explain that a 16-year-old boy has a very voracious appetite and he needs to be fed quite heartily. So you need to feed him properly. And thus the devotees then changed the system immediately, and they got a bigger plate and bigger offering and made the proper size offerings, etc., for the pleasure of Krishna under the direction of Srila Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada says, when a pure devotee or spiritual master speaks, what he says should be accepted as having been directly spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in Parampara. So Madhvidasi was sharing how Srila Prabhupada was very expert in answering, you know, questions to the devotees in very specific, relevant ways. One time there was a darshan with some guests and devotees, about 25 230 devotees were gathered in the Detroit temple. And there was a Indian gentleman who was sitting right in front of Srila Prabhupada, in front of a desk. Srila Prabhupada had a low desk that Prabhupada would generally sit behind, to transcribe and write. And in front of that desk immediately was a Indian gentleman. And this Indian gentleman, he asked Srila Prabhupada, Swamiji, can you read my palm? Srila Prabhupada said, Yogesham Vahamyaham. We simply depend on Krishna. He maintains us. He sustains us. So Prabhupada, really was not interested in reading anyone's palm. We depend on Krishna, Prabhupada basically says. And Prabhupada also, in a very interesting side note, Prabhupada said that too much dependence on palmistry, gemstones, astrology, these different aspects, this kills the childlike innocence of bhakti. So we have to be very careful. We want to depend on Krishna. So Prabhupada gave a very nice example, but still, the man was insistent and said, Swamiji, can you read my palm? So Prabhupada noticed that this gentleman, was not really interested, and he was pushing. So Prabhupada immediately said, give me your hand. And Prabhupada took the gentleman's hand, switched on the desk lamp, and like an expert palmer, palmist, Srila Prabhupada was studying, pressing different parts of his palm and saying, hmm. Uh, and then the devotees, they thought, wow, Prabhupada is reading palms. We're gonna be next. We're gonna tell Prabhupada to read our palms. So after some time of Prabhupada doing this, Prabhupada slammed the man's hand and said, all bad. Prabhupada said, birth, death, disease, and old age. Mm. Prabhupada paused for a while. The man got a shock. And then Prabhupada said, with a big smile, Prabhupada said, if you chant in Kirtan, all the lines will go away. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
So Prabhupada really appreciated the devotees. He actually never criticized the Vaishnavas. He never wanted to hear people criticize the Vaishnavas. Like in India, so many times when people would criticize the Western disciples, Prabhupada would stand up for his followers and always speak good about them. But Prabhupada had one issue with the devotees, and his issue with the devotees was that he felt that the devotees were not spending enough time reading his books. Prabhupada said, one time when he pointed to several of his books that he had written, he told the devotees, these books are for you. Don't make it an export business that they only buy and sell to others. For themselves, these books are of no use. Prabhupada imitated a devotee distributing his books. Please take this book, it's very important. Then Prabhupada switched roles to like a customer's role, and he said, oh, it's important? What is it about? And then Prabhupada again switched roles, as if he's the devotee. He said, I don't know, it's for you. So Prabhupada, kept telling the devotees, my only criticism, Prabhupada's exact words was, my only criticism of the devotees is that they think my books are for distribution and not for reading. So one time, when Prabhupada was sitting uh, behind that low desk Prabhu was just speaking about, and he was smiling, then he spoke about the humility of advanced devotees. And Burichan Prabhu, he said to Srila Prabhupada at that time, Prabhupada, my only qualification is that I'm a fool. And then Prabhupada looked at him sharply and he said, yes, but you should not remain a fool. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
While managing your ISKCON, that's actually a poem. All right. It's actually part of a poem that. Okay. So one time Srila Prabhupada arrived in a temple and greeted the deities. And Prabhupada said, be very careful. Do not become proud. You are dealing with Radha and Krishna. If you become proud, everything will be spoiled. Another time, one guest asked Srila Prabhupada, why does Krishna wear peacock feather? And the devotees were expecting some esoterical reason, but Prabhupada simply said, because he likes to. Another occasion, Srila Prabhupada is sitting on a Vyasasan, and he said, Krishna consciousness is so simple that you will miss it. It's so simple that you will miss it. Now, there was an interesting pastime when Srila Prabhupada arrived 1968. Srila Prabhupada arrived at the Boston Harbor and put his transcendental foot on American soil. On that day when Srila Prabhupada arrived, 17 September 1968, it's described that 1965, when Srila Prabhupada arrived, years later, there was a initiated disciple of Srila Prabhupada. He shared how his grandfather was working for the American Army. And just before Srila Prabhupada was about to arrive in America, the devotee was narrating that he actually had a discussion with his grandfather, and his grandfather was narrating this pastime that he was working in the army, and he was, like the one leader in this uh, army, where he was about to be given an instruction to uh, release a disastrous bomb, like a nuclear bomb, and he was just waiting for the instruction. And it was on the same day that Srila Prabhupada arrived in America, and he was there ready to press the button, and then the message came, it's called off. Do not press the button, it's called off. So this devotee recollects how amazing, if Srila Prabhupada, Krishna had made all the arrangements for Srila Prabhupada. And here we find that Krishna even stopped a disastrous war because Srila Prabhupada had an important message to deliver. And we know even on a Jaladuta, Srila Prabhupada went through so much austerities, difficulties, seasickness, heart attacks. And Prabhupada had this dream that Krishna and all the incarnations are pulling the Jaladuta and sailing. And even the captain acknowledged that never had he experienced the ocean so calm, because every trip that they made, and they made many hundreds of trips, in every trip there would be cyclones, storms, wind blowing, the waves would be very large and swaying the ship. But this time it was like a smooth sail. So clearly Krishna made all the arrangements for Srila Prabhupada to go to America and give the world the gift of Krishna consciousness.
Prabhupada is an extraordinary person, directly connected to Krishna. Um, I was thinking of a pastime of Radha London Ishwara. So these deities, Radha London Ishwara, were installed by Srila Prabhupada, and at one point in time, a young boy joined the temple, and his service was to wash do backup for Radha London Ishwara. So this young boy was actually His Holiness, later on grew up to become His Holiness Sachinandan Maharaj. So when he was doing backup for Radha London Ishwara, he was quite a disturbed young man, because his grandfather was actually on his deathbed, and his family was pressurizing him to come back home and meet his grandfather, whom he had a very close relationship with. Um, so they wanted him to come for closure, to be with the grandfather in his last days. And Maharaj explains that he was so disturbed at that time because he didn't want to go, because he knew that if his grandfather on his deathbed said, abandon the Hare Krishna movement. Don't, what's this? You should come home and stay with your family. So his final instructions on his deathbed will be taken very seriously by the family. So there'll be a lot of pressure on this young boy to now renounce what his newfound happiness of being a Hare Krishna devotee. So he was so disturbed. What decision? What should he do? And unfortunately, when the mind is occupied, preoccupied, full attention to service is sometimes the consequence. So Maharaj was washing the plates of Radhaland and Ishwara, but unfortunately, he wasn't doing a pretty good job because the ghee was still stuck on the Lord's offering bowls. Probably was washing it with cold water, not enough soap, just rinsing it, kind of thing. And because of the short staff that they had in the temple, the pujari was always in a rush. So he was also inattentive. So he would come into the kitchen and just before time to do the offering, and he would rush to set the Lord's plate, dish out, and dish the offering into the bowls. So he never noticed whether the bowls were clean or dirty either. So thus, the service of the Lord was thus being compromised. And when Prabhupada came to that temple, he went straight to the temple room, didn't speak to any of the devotees. He went straight to the temple room and he was standing in front of Radha London Ishwara, and immediately he turned to the temple president and he said, the deity's plates are not being washed properly. So the temple president was like shocked. He was so taken aback. The Prabhupada had just arrived. Nobody had spoken to him. How could he know that the plates of the Lord were unclean? So he went. Anand Maharaj said when he heard that, he got his answer. First of all, he learned that he must wash the plates properly because Krishna is not just a stone, and he reciprocates. He complained to Srila Prabhupada, his dear most servant. So at that time, Maharaj said he knew at that time the stark reality hit him straight in the face that Prabhupada is no ordinary person, and to serve such a person is no ordinary feat, that he is directly in touch with Krishna. So, such a rare opportunity in our human birth after so many endeavors of enjoying in this world, that we have come in touch with such a personality, and hence it behooves us as intelligent people to not take it lightly.
Srila Prabhupada says, to kill nothing, that is love. So Mother Mula Prakriti shares one pastime uh, where Srila Prabhupada told her. So on one morning, uh, she was speaking to Srila Prabhupada, and he told Mother Mula Prakriti an amazing thing. He explained how this was in Vrindavan, when Srila Prabhupada was staying in Vrindavan near Sevakunj. So he explained how he is often chanting in his room at midnight. Srila Prabhupada would chant till midnight. And he said, I could hear some dogs barking, but sometimes I have also heard some very melodious flute sounds coming from near Sevakunj. I heard this 2 or 3 times. It was not any ordinary human being, because I never heard such a beautiful sound. I'm thinking this may be Sri Krishna, no doubt. And Srila Prabhupada said it couldn't have been a dream or imagination, because he could also hear the dogs barking in the background as usual. So Srila Prabhupada, no doubt, uh, is a very special personality connected with Krishna because of his complete dedication and service. And Srila Prabhupada came to this world to really connect everyone to Krishna and to take us back to Godhead. In one letter, Srila Prabhupada wrote to Dr. Rajendra Prasad, the president of India, uh, in Delhi, Indian Union, Delhi, 21st November 1956. Prabhupada wrote him in a letter. Prabhupada wrote, "Believe me or not, I have got the clue of going back to Godhead just after leaving my present material body. And in order to take along with me all my contemporary men and women of the world, I have started my paper Back to Godhead as one of the means to the way. Please do not think of me as an wonderful or a madman when I say that I shall go back to Godhead after leaving my present material body. It is quite possible for everyone and all of us to go back home to Godhead."
So Prabhupada really appreciated any service that a person did, whether it was big or small. And like in Mayapur, Prabhupada, he saw this one devotee. I think his name was Shankar Das, and Prabhupada told him to plant flowers. And it was such an incredible thing that Prabhupada, he could do a big service for Krishna, and he could do small services also for Krishna. Prabhupada could do anything. It was so incredible how he valued every single devotee. One devotee was saying that they were standing outside, I think it was the Toronto temple, and Prabhupada was coming, and they were thinking, Prabhupada, only the big guns in the temple kind of hang up close to Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada's not going to really notice us. And just at that time, Prabhupada's car pulled up. And Prabhupada turned and he looked at these devotees, and he smiled at them. And the devotee narrating the pastime said, at that time, she felt that Prabhupada values each and every person in this movement. So, my realization is that the devotees, big or small in this movement, old and new, they are all equally valuable to Srila Prabhupada. They are equally valuable, just like on a tulsi tree, you find big leaves, you find big, luscious green leaves, you find smaller leaves, then you may even find dry leaves at the base of the tulsi tree. But all of them bring equal amount of pleasure to Lord Krishna. So, honoring each other, taking the dust of the feet of all of you, I would say that we should follow in the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada and not unnecessarily become judgmental about the devotees, but always remember that they can bring an equal amount of pleasure to Krishna as you can or as anybody can. And I think I will conclude with that one.
So Veerabahu Prabhu, recollects that an interesting point he noticed over and over is how Srila Prabhupada had a nick of, his own trend of thought. And in most cases, very unexpectedly, Srila Prabhupada would generally change the trend of thought or bring up a specific point. Just like, for example, Srila Prabhupada will be walking, in a park, and Prabhupada used his cane and pointed on the ground where there was bird stool, droppings of bird stool at one place. Mm. And Prabhupada pointed to the bird stool and asked the devotees who were walking with him, "What is this?" Now the devotees, they were like wondering, like, uh, it's obvious, right? It's bird stool. So they were a little confused, and so there's a proper bird stool. So they gave different answers, all bewildered, and Prabhupada then pointed up to the branch of the tree, and Prabhupada said, "Attachment." Because the bird is attached to that branch, the bird would come, sit on that branch, and then pass to one place, and therefore it became like a heap. So this way Prabhupada was very expert. So one time, uh, there was the Virabhadra was discussing with Srila Prabhupada that even the scientists, they acknowledge that whatever is created in nature by, they didn't say God, but created by Krishna, we know is even better. So the scientists acknowledge that what's created by nature is even better than what they themselves create and invent. And uh, they said, even the material body is the most perfect machine. So Srila Prabhupada immediately he said, "Where is perfection?" Mm, But it is the most perfect machine. Not that it's perfect, but it's the most perfect machine. And Prabhupada said, "Where's the perfection? If it's perfect, then why are we dying?" So it's a perfect machine, but it's not perfect. Why? Because there is uh, a flaw that we have to die. Therefore, it's not perfection. Going back to the spiritual world, getting your spiritual form and serving in your eternal service to Krishna, that is perfection. So we like to conclude here. Uh, Please continue remembering Srila Prabhupada, serving Srila Prabhupada, being eternally grateful to Srila Prabhupada to really give us, to Oma Gyana Timirandasya. We are born blind in this world. And Srila Prabhupada has really lit our life. He's given us Krishna consciousness, the knowledge of Krishna, the knowledge of the spiritual world. He's given us the process of how to practice. He's given us all the details of how to practice, what not to do, what to do. Prabhupada has given us so much. Prabhupada is basically saving every living entity that comes in contact with him, his philosophy, his movement, his followers. So we are, greatly blessed, and we should always remember that. And Srila Prabhupada, in so many letters and so many instructions, Prabhupada said, if you chant minimum 16 rounds daily, nicely, attentively, if you follow the four irregular principles, and you try to preach to the best of your capacity, whether that capacity is like Hanuman, throwing big, big, big boulders and mountains, or whether that capacity is like a squirrel or like a spider, just pushing some grains of sand into the ocean. It doesn't matter. If you do your best to serve Srila Prabhupada, then Prabhupada says that at the end of this life, you are guaranteed to go back home, back to Godhead. So we'll end here. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you very much for paying attention and hearing the glories of Srila Prabhupada. Nitai Go Pramnande. Hari Hari Bo.